Hello, Jan Montarsi here. I'm here to show you what my friend Linda from NatureScapes Studio and I have been up to. We designed a button template to make buttons. Now these are all buttons I've made recently. These aren't baked yet, but you can see how perfectly placed the holes are. This one was cut with plastic wrap so that it had domed edges. None of these have been sanded, and I will get you to the tutorial in a minute. These two large ones I baked in a dome form so they'd be curved. They haven't been sanded. And these are some of the smaller hole buttons. There's two hole button templates and 4 hole button templates. They work with any of your round cutters. These, and I'm going to show you this real quick, are slightly rounded over. These are just some old cane that I had that's really dried out. I'll show you that now. So I had this cane that was really dried out. So I put a little liquid clay on the back piece of the piece, and I laid it on a base sheet of clay, and I let it set for about a day. And then I burnished it real good because what was happening before, it was cracking. Then I used my template and cut my button. And I'm going to cut that off of there and show you how I rounded that button before I get into the actual use of the template. Peel off this excess here. And we have a perfect button. Now Linda also sells a tool that she and her husband make. It's a glass burnisher rod. It's a beautiful tool. But when you have a button like this and you want to curve the edge, you just take that glass paddle on the end and just work. It's easier if you have one button on one tile. I can't get to the other edge. But I just put it onto the tile and keep that angle and just work that end rounded. You can see it starting to round. And if you ever needed to smooth one that you rounded with plastic wrap, it works very well for that. Okay, I'm going to get on to the video and show you the templates. And I'll be back. You can find her on Facebook. She does have some YouTube videos. She makes awesome tools. These are her clay punch cutters. They're hand sharpened brass clay punch tools. Lets you make awesome cut and replace things like this box that I made the lid for my box of cutters. She also has this beautiful glass burnishers. I believe her husband makes these. And they're great for smoothing the edges and smoothing over the edges of cut polymer clay. One of my other favorite tools of hers is this fish eye tweezers. And these are great for getting something like an earring and let it hang so you can find the center balance point for something that's not symmetrical. But getting to today's item, this is the ButtonEasy kit. It's for making polymer clay buttons. Here's a few I have made. Here's a few that I made for testing that are not the prettiest color, but I tested them and glazed them. And it really makes button making simple, easy, and more professional looking than anything that I've seen. Okay, so to get started, I want to show you the kit first. You have different sizes of button templates. And each button template, I'm going to leave them down because it's easier to see. This particular group has 4 and 2 holes. And when you get to these smaller ones, they're smaller holes. And this last set, the holes are closer together than this set, and the same with the bigger sets. These holes are closer together than these holes. That gives you an option for different size buttons with, you know, the holes in the right places. The kit also comes, and she'll have various versions of kits, I'm sure. This is 2 sizes of brass tube punch cutters. One comes with a bead pin that's used as a pusher to push out the clay. The other one comes with a brass bar, a brass rod. Both ends of both tools are sharpened, and they fit the holes exactly. So let's make a button. Now here I have a piece of just the thickest setting polymer clay. And actually, normally, what I would do is make my thickest sheet of polymer clay, and then I put a veneer on top of that and burnish it in so that it's even a little bit thicker. I'm using Primo. This button is slightly bendy on this big one, but this small one, not at all. So you can use your clay of choice. Maybe something like Kato might be firmer, but I think these are really good. So I would at least go for your thickest setting and then a veneer on top, and you could put a veneer on both sides of the button. Okay, so I'm going to make a 4-hole button. And you can see on the template here, there's 4 holes in the center for the buttonholes, and there's divots around the perimeter. Those are registration marks. So I'm going to put my template onto my clay and smooth it down and go around the edge to make sure you make all those registration marks. I'll do a small one here too. You don't have to rub too hard, just enough to make those marks. And then you take your clay punch cutter and pull the bar out. I leave it in there, but it's partially out. And then you just go into the holes and cut and remove your little plugs of clay. It's that easy. And I'll go ahead and do the small one here. You can probably leave that in there and just do a couple before you push out the clay. Then you take the pin or a bead pin or a needle tool and you lift up and remove the templates. Now, one thing you can do, while the template's still on there, you can see those registration marks, the divots. You can use either the tool or the brass rod on the larger size. But if you need to, I have aging eyes, so sometimes it's hard for me to see. So I'm just highlighting those registration marks with my thing. Not cutting them out, just making marks. And I'll show you the difference of that. I'm staying at the edge. I don't want to mess up my button. Okay, so now I have 2 buttons ready to cut. And you can see the registration marks on this one, the bumps, and this one where the holes are. And the purpose of those registration marks, I'll try to make sure I'm right under the camera for you. So now we have a cutter, round cutters. Buttons are round. And you can set that. There's a piece of clay in there. You can set that and try to eyeball center it. But what the registration marks do is you can look side to side and make sure everything your cutter is equal distant between every 2 sets of registration marks. That looks pretty good. And then cut. I usually twist my cutter a little bit. And I'll do this one with a smaller cutter. Oh, let's do this size button. Now, here I'll show you why it's easier for me. With highlighting your registration marks, it just makes it a lot easier for my old eyes. And that's a dirty cutter. For my old eyes to center it. So what I'm looking at is the space between the outside of the cutter and the registration mark. And I'm get on an angle here. You can see this side, I have more space than I have on this side. So I'm just going to move it over a little bit before I cut. And there, that's good. Nope, I need to go up a little bit. It really helps you get well centered, and that looks good. So I'm going to cut that out. Now, of course, my cutter was dirty, but that's not a big deal. So at this point, I'm going to cut that off because I'm going to try to make a few more maybe. You just peel off your background clay, bake your buttons. Now this one I got smudge on, but that's all right. I can sand that off. I'm a sander, but I don't think you would really need to sand these. Another thing you can do at this point, if you have, this is a texture I have, you can texture them. I'm not pressing hard. This is for good for if you're not going to want to varnish or do anything like that. You just want to get rid of any fingerprints or pasta machine roller marks. So that's another idea for those. Gives a little texture to the button. Now I'm going to peel this one off because I'm not going to bake that with that schmutz on it. But I will show you Linda's glass tool here. That was right at the edge where the seam was on my cutter, which had crud in it. But this tool is awesome for smoothing those. Any rough cut edges on your cut pieces of clay. I have hot hands and the lights are hot. But normally when I work, I cut them, I leave them, I pull off the excess, and I bake. I'm going to make a big button here. Just to go over that again. Smooth it on. Make sure the perimeter is well marked. Use your needle tool if you want. You can, I'll do the registration marks here for you on this one so it's easier to see for the camera. You don't have to do that, like I said. Just makes it easier for me to see. And then cut out my marked holes. And then remove my template. Now this is obviously going to make a big button, which, you know, for a project or something that's not really close, that's too big. Let me get a smaller one. That's a good one. I want to be able to show you the registration marks. So I've just quickly eyeballed that and sat and looked at it and thought, oh, that looks like center. But now that I'm looking, the space between this dot and this dot, I don't know why I can't get that camera angle right. I guess it's just a camera thing. But the space between the cutter and this dot and the cutter of that dot, you can see how much farther away that is. So I'm just going to pick up my cutter and gently move it that direction. Now they look even. Now I'm checking the next set. I need to go back a little bit that size. And if you're like me, most of my cutters aren't perfectly round, but it's an imperfect world. Okay, so I think I'm pretty much even. Also, the other line I have It's that, you know, circular perimeter line too that helps me line it up. And there goes one of my dogs barking. They can't wait. There we go. Now I'm going to bake these and they'll be ready to go. Here's 2 buttons I had baked earlier. Nice hard buttons. And here's one with a veneer that I haven't baked yet. You can see the registration marks I made. I'm gonna texture this one. I'll put the right side of the texture sheet down. I'm gonna texture that before I pull the clay off. There we go. Nicely textured. Okay, I have 2 more little short things I wanted to show you. One is a square button and one is a heart-shaped button. Now I have this heart-shaped cutter, but I don't know how to find the middle. So I find a round cutter. This one just exactly fits, just exactly inside of there, which is great. So you can find something like that. And you could do this with a 2 or a 4 hole. I'm going to cut out my 2 centers here. Then I'm going to remove my template. And I'm going to use my round cutter to get centered. This is not the most perfectly round cutter. So I'm trying to put the seam where it's going to be cut away by the heart shape. Using my registration lines, I need to go up a little bit. Okay, so that's perfectly centered. Now I'm going to drop my heart cutter down in there, hoping to keep it straight. That looks straight. Now I'm just pressing down on the heart cutter. I'll remove the round cutter. Wiggle. There you go. If you need a heart-shaped button, there it is. You could have your holes going the other way also. Next one is square. Now, so I got a Kemper cutter. It's square, but I can't see through it. I cut out my clay. And I'm just going to show you this before I put my template on. That cutter's too big for that size. So I need to get the next one down. All right, so I have my square cutter. But once we take the clay off here, what I'm looking at these 4 corner dots. It doesn't matter which angle you're on. The registration marks, if you make those all equal distance and then check side to side from the cutter, you should be good for a square button. So I can't see through this, so I'm just going to use my registration holes. Okay, this one and this one looks good. This one and this one looks good. That one I need to come a little bit over towards that one. I think I'm good. Now I don't remember which way my holes were. I should have probably looked at that, but I think I'm fine. Okay, yep, there we go. Nice square button. Heart-shaped button. And you are good to go. Okay, I just wanted to show you one more use with the template. So now this is some cane slices, as I said earlier, that were old, and I put liquid clay on them, and I put them on a backing sheet of clay, And my template is bigger than any one of my cane slices. So I'm going to place it where I want to have my button centers. But see, now I'm out here under the scrap clay. So if you're going to use something like this, have your backing clay be bigger than the template if possible. But if not, like here, I can't use that mark. But at least if I can get 4 marks, there's one out onto the scrap clay. There's one there. There's one there, and this one's actually onto the other cane slice, but that won't interfere with the next button. And I can probably get one there and there. That way you have enough holes. The other thing that's using the template, when it's on the clay while you're cutting your buttonholes, it stabilizes your clay. So you're not getting distortion when you're cutting out your buttonholes. And if you push out your next thing of clay, make sure you make the rod flush. I usually press it on the template, not on the raw clay hole that I'm going to cut, because it might make a divot before you actually cut. So make sure it's level first. And pressing it on the template versus the tile will keep your cutter sharper longer. I've never had any of these go dull. All the other ones I use, the other shapes, they're all as good as the day I bought them. Okay, so now we have our buttonholes cut, our perimeter registration marks marked. And so I can use these 2 holes here. That's even. I have a mark here and a mark out here. And that looks fairly even. And I can still have 2 marks here, which I need to come over a little bit there, and here, and here. I'm a little off. Okay, I'll make my cut. Spin my cutter. And there I have a nice button. I'm not going to peel that off yet until I cut the other 2. But using the template really helps stabilize your clay. One more thing I wanted to show you is how to make buttons that have dimples, like this one. That's not a very good one. It was my first test one. And also to remind you, whenever you have a button you're cutting that's an odd shape, I will do that first. Make your marks, perimeter marks. Cut your holes. Sorry if you can't see what I'm doing there. Cut your holes. Oops, I didn't take my template off. Take your template off. Using your registration mark, center your cutter. I'm using this one upside down because my other cutter fits in it better. Then you drop in your shape cutter. I need to use something else to push that down because it's a very tight fit. I don't want to press the plunger. Hopefully I got all the way through. Yep, I did. And there you have a nice random shape button with centered holes. Okay, the dimplers. So on this one, I baked these. Some of them are 2 layers thick. They're baked hard. And this is scrap clay on the thickest setting. And to do that, you just cut 2, and hopefully they don't stick in your cutter, and bake that without touching it. You want a nice, straight, smooth, slightly rounded edge from making the cut, which will always round the edge a little. Put your good side down, and if you want, you can use a little bit of water or powder, or you can just use some plastic deli wrap. And I'm just pressing in a dimple first. Then I will place my template and make sure that it's centered over the dimple. Smooth the edge. Make your perimeter marks if you need to. I always do. Remove your template. And I'm going to use a different cutter. Oop. I removed my template and I didn't cut my holes. Cut your holes. Remove your template. And then use your registration marks to center your cutter if you can't see through it. When I can't see through them, I pay attention to my marks. I also pay attention to the round circle impression of the edge of the template. Cut your button, which I was off. But anyway, you get the idea. I just wanted to show you that. I hope you enjoyed this video. Check out Linda's other tools. She has some great stuff on her site. All stuff she uses. Comes with a tube. And whatever package deal she makes up on her templates and cutter, punch cutters. But check out her other stuff while you're at her site. This is a beautiful tool. And her clay punch cutters. You can buy the individual shapes. You can buy the whole set. They're an awesome tool to have.